Oh, hey there, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, I'm the newsman, Sam Sachs. Happy Halloween. For me, though, it's just a normal Thursday show. Meow, let's get started. An annual tradition was held at the United Nations this week in which nearly every single country voted to end the U.S. embargo on Cuba, and the U.S. responded by saying, no, we're not going to do that. 187 countries supported the resolution calling for an end to the 65-year-old blockade. The Republic of Moldova abstained, and 2 countries voted no, the United States and Israel. As they say, the couple that violates international law together stays together. This marks the 32nd year in a row that the UN General Assembly nearly unanimously called for an end to the U.S. economic warfare program on Cuba, which is extremely destructive to the civilian population, costing the country over $5 billion a day and trillions of dollars since it was first imposed. It's devastated Cuba's healthcare system, crippled its banking sector, and strained the island's access to energy. The anti-war group Code Pink released this statement after the vote, quote, "The embargo on Cuba is not only unjust, but it also contravenes the United Nations Charter and international law by denying Cuba the inalienable right to development. The embargo's extraterritorial reach hampers humanitarian aid and foreign trade with Cuba, cutting off resources essential to the Cuban people, including medical supplies." Relations with Cuba have actually backslid since President Obama took steps to normalize engagements with the island and abstain from this very vote back in 2019. Those steps, though, were rolled back by the Trump administration, which placed Cuba back on the state sponsor of terrorism list and resumed voting no on the UN resolution against the embargo. And President Biden has largely continued the same maximum pressure policy toward Cuba. Here was State Department ghoul Matt Miller pressed by reporters after the UN vote.
I'm aware of the long history of UN votes on this matter.
Yes. Okay. So at what point, though, are you guys going to realize that the entire world, with the exception of you and Israel, thinks that the embargo is a really bad idea and should be stopped?
Look, I think we are quite clear on the opinion of other countries around the world, and it's one with which we disagree. We take their opinion seriously, but we make our own policy determinations.
It's 32 years in a row, with the exception of 1 year when you guys abstained.
We take their views quite seriously, but we make our own determinations about these matters, and we disagree.
You take their views quite seriously? That's just not borne out by the facts that you continue to persist with this.
We take them seriously, but we make our own decisions.
Yep, we are the baddies. The Cuban Revolution happened 65 years ago, and the U.S. and its allied business interests just refused to take the L and get over it. Turning now to Gaza, where Israel continues to bomb critical healthcare centers. Al Jazeera reported that a stash of medicine received from the World Health Organization was destroyed in an Israeli attack on the Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza's Bet Lahia neighborhood. A number of hospital workers have also been injured in the sustained attacks. Targeting hospitals is, of course, a war crime, and if Israel is using U.S.-provided weapons to do so, that would also violate U.S. law. The mechanisms within the U.S. government to determine these things, however, have been rendered totally ineffective by design. According to the Washington Post, the White House is well aware of the carnage Israel is causing with the weapons provided by the U.S. The administration, in fact, has received nearly 500 individual reports of American weapons being used to harm civilians in Gaza, including eyewitness testimony and photographic evidence. It's according to the Post. International and domestic law requires the U.S. to take action to restrict weapons if it's determined that they're being used in a way that violates international law. And internal State Department guidelines recommend action be taken within 2 months of opening an inquiry into potential misuse. But those regulations are being ignored, and the department is simply keeping the investigations in limbo in order to avoid taking action against Israel. Not a single case has reached the action stage, the Post reported, and more than 2/3 of cases remain unresolved because officials are waiting on responses from the Israeli government. Quote, current and former U.S. officials described a process that, while detailed and deliberate on paper, has become functionally irrelevant, with more senior leaders at the State Department broadly dismissive of non-Israeli sources and unwilling to sign off on action plans. Some U.S. officials and congressional Democrats have been frustrated by the State Department's apparent tendency to rely on Israel to substantiate the allegations against it. So somewhere out there exists a paper trail of complicity. And if Israel is ever held accountable for the genocide it's conducting in Gaza, then officials in the Biden administration will be implicated too, despite their best efforts to maintain some plausible deniability. The Supreme Court just voided a key provision of election law that protects voters, and the justices didn't even offer a legal rationale for why. The 6 conservative justices on the High Court agreed to allow a purge of voter rolls in Virginia by Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin to continue. The purge had been blocked by a lower court that found it illegal for a number of reasons. One, the purge, which had kicked 1,600 people off the rolls under suspicion that they aren't legal citizens, included individuals who were indeed eligible to vote. That's because the DMV information used by the state to cross-reference voter rolls is often incomplete, incorrect, or out of date. And even though people who are wrongfully purged can still re-register and vote on the same day as the election, they are denied the ability to vote by absentee or by mail, causing them harm. The lower court also found that the purge violated a provision of the National Voter Registration Act, which prohibits states from systematically removing voters from the rolls 90 days before an election, known as the quiet period. Since the case was brought to the Supreme Court under an emergency appeal, justices often don't provide legal reasoning. Then again, the court also isn't supposed to transform election law under those circumstances either. The 3 liberal justices, Kagan, Sotomayor, and Brown-Jackson, noted on the ruling that they would have left the lower court order blocking the purge in effect. A Virginia Public Radio investigation found that non-citizens voting is actually a non-issue in Virginia. Quote, Radio IQ's review of over 650 cases of election-related crimes in Virginia's state court system over the last 20 years found no instances of a non-citizen being convicted of voting illegally. Criminal prosecutions came from across the Commonwealth. About 60 cases of illegally voting were found, but none involved citizenship status. Over 48 million votes were cast by Virginians in the same 20-year time period. Of course, Governor Youngkin's purge isn't actually about stopping ineligible voters. That's just the rationale. What it's really about is suppressing Democratic voters in the final days of the election. And the conservative majority on the United States Supreme Court just gave its approval to the tactic. Other state officials will take notice. A new report from Wired provides a glimpse inside Elon Musk's Get Out the Vote operation, and it's about what you'd expect from a guy notorious for labor abuses. Musk has committed over $100 million to help elect Donald Trump, with all the money flowing through his America PAC. In addition to cutting offensive ads that are immediately taken down, the America PAC is also spearheading the Trump campaign's Get Out the Vote efforts in battleground states, operations that have already come under criticism for being mostly smoke and mirrors. But according to Wired, it's even worse than that. Quote, in Michigan, canvassers and paid door knockers for the former president, contracted by a firm associated with America PAC, have been subjected to poor working conditions. A number of them have been driven around in the back of a seatless U-Haul van, according to video obtained by Wired, and threatened that their lodging at a local motel wouldn't be paid for if they didn't meet canvassing quotas. One door knocker alleges that they didn't even know they were signing up for anything having to do with Musk or Trump. Workers say that they were informed that they were canvassing on behalf of Donald Trump only after they signed a non-disclosure agreement. Now, driving canvassers around in a U-Haul is basically unheard of and extremely dangerous. Again, this is from Wired. Quote, the video from inside the van shows a bumpy ride, with a cage separating the mostly black door knockers from their driver. The driver also told the group of door knockers that he was in pain and had difficulty driving. Quote, I just had surgery, bro, the U-Haul driver says in another recording obtained by Wired. Quote, like half my foot is cut off. Quote, I'm scared, the door knocker, who spoke to Wired, replies on the recording. I'm scared. So this is the sort of operation $100 million of Elon Musk's money pays for, huh? A source close to the Trump campaign acknowledged that Musk is screwing this up. They told Wired, quote, I think it's what happens when you let a bunch of grifters take over. What happens is you skim a bunch of money off the top, and then you hire the dumbest people and pay them a little bit of money. There's no way of tracking whether it's effective or not. It's hard to track the output and thus the effectiveness of the output. Meanwhile, Musk's other ground game tactic, paying individual Trump supporters $1 million each to register to vote, is now under scrutiny by the Department of Justice. Gotta say, Trump losing next week would be a good thing. Trump losing and Elon Musk being blamed for it? Now we're really talking. And Trump losing, Elon Musk being blamed for it, and implicating himself in a host of election crimes in the process? And I'm practically doing the Vince McMahon meme over here. Whew, boy. For this week in Working Class History, we're taking the trolley back in time to 1913 and the Indianapolis streetcar strike. About 800 workers, organized by the Amalgamated Street Railway Employees of America, went on strike on Halloween night, demanding higher wages, job security, and union recognition. Their employer, the Indianapolis Traction and Terminal Company, refused to negotiate and instead brought in scabs to operate the transit system. In retrospect, that was the wrong decision, because the strike had the support of the local community, and thousands of able-bodied union supporters across Indianapolis showed up to shut the city down. Over the course of a week, the city rioted. The crowds overwhelmed the strikebreakers hired by the company, and then overwhelmed the police who were brought in to protect the streetcars. A lot of officers at the time actually supported the strike and abandoned their posts and refused orders to fire on the workers. Just 3 days into the strike, and the number of police officers in the city dropped to fewer than 50. Meanwhile, as many as 10,000 people had taken control of the streets, grinding the city to a halt. The governor called up the National Guard, declared martial law, and installed Gatling guns around the streetcar depots. But crucially, he did not order troops to restart streetcar service. Instead, he ordered the streetcar company to negotiate with its workers. And in the end, a settlement was reached that included wage increases, though not as much as the union was seeking. Settlement also included recognition of the union, but did not require the streetcar company to be a closed union shop. The company would go on to prohibit union reps from organizing on company property. Thanks to the crew at Workingclass History who gave us access to their archives. Follow them on social media to learn more about this story and other events that happened in working class history, including the 1963 Harlem rent strike, the 1978 strike in the Iranian oil fields, and the 1996 building workers strike in New York City. We'll be back with more next week. All right, friends, the show ends today with a sunrise from Portugal. It was sent in by Anya in Lisbon. Enjoy. Thank you, Anya. Show's over. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please sign up for Means TV, subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels, and follow us on social media. One day capitalism will fall. Until then, we're going to be right here. Except for tomorrow, the team has the day off, so I'll see you next week.